We are live from Taree in the mid-north coast, which is in the middle area of the state at the moment, especially when it comes to the fire crisis that is gripping much of the state. Worth remembering that while the threat has eased somewhat this morning, there are still 83 fires burning, most of which are still out of control, basically, that they could burr up at any moment. So, joining us, Deputy Premier John Barilaro joins us live now from Sydney. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So, are you breathing a sigh of relief?
Oh, look, I think we got through yesterday. You know, the prediction for the conditions yesterday were dire. We were concerned. It's why the Premier called for a state of emergency. It's why we shut down 600 plus schools. It's why we put in plans in place to make sure we could deal with it. But, you know, and there is a relief today that it didn't get to the extent that we were predicting. But as you've touched on, there are still a lot of fires across the state, many out of control, and we still have 1,000 firefighters on the fire front. So even though there is a sigh of relief that it didn't get to the extreme issue of yesterday or conditions yesterday, we still are worried about what's happening across the state.
Yeah, John, there's some concern. People have said to me, even in the past few hours or so, was there a real need to go so hard with catastrophic fire conditions because people were expecting things to be much worse than they actually were?
Well, you know, in parts of the state, we've got some significant fires. We've seen winds of 80 kilometres. We've got fire fronts that are significant. There are so many fires happening, and we've been fighting fires for a long time. So I think what our communities expect from government and leadership is to put every measure in place. And what the predictions were for yesterday, I think it would have been wrong if we didn't treat it as serious as we did. And I think I'd rather be safe than sorry. And I think we now deal with the fires that are in front of us.
All right, now you've had a crack at the National Parks and Wildlife Service saying that they have not met the annual reduction target of 135,000 hectares. How much do you think that is to blame for the fires?
I mean, anyone that's lived in regional rural New South Wales, if you talk to anyone that spends time in some of our national parks, it's clear that, you know, the fuel load has been building and building year on year and year out, and we're all been mindful of that. And you know, we're sort of sick to death of the ideological position that you just lock up national parks and hope for the best. We've got to burn, we've got to do the hazard reduction. You know, the Indigenous people burnt this country to protect it. That's exactly what they did, and we don't do that. We do it at State Forest because we protect the asset there, because there's a dollar value, but yet we don't do it in national parks. And I know we do some, but it's nowhere near enough, and we haven't done it for decades properly.
So what is the shortfall, do you think? Because, I mean, it's also worth reminding here too that the conditions have to be right. So don't they deserve some kind of reprieve there? Because, you know, if you're backburning or you're hazard reducing in times of extreme drought, and we all know that drought has been gripping the state for a long, long time now, so don't the conditions have to be right to be able to do that safely?
Yeah, of course you have to have conditions that are right, but we do that. We have certain parts of the year that we are able to do hazard reduction, and we've got to increase the resources to do it. And so that'll be on government at some point, but at the same time there's got to be a willingness to do it. And you know, we've been fighting an ideological war about locking up national parks from anything from those that want to visit national parks, those that want to have some activity in national parks. We do nothing with them, and in the same vein around hazard reduction. So, you know, we're not going to be doing hazard reduction now, but in the cooler months, regardless even of drought, in the cooler months you are able to do so. And I think that, you know, out of every disaster, and these fires, this is a disaster, there have got to be lessons learned. And let's get on with it. Let's get out through these fires and start planning for next year in relation to hazard reduction at a level that we haven't done for a long time.
They have accused you of hypocrisy, pointing to the fact that 289 ranges have been reduced to 193. So do they have a point when it comes to such significant staff cuts?
Well, the PSA will be out there talking about staff cuts, but if you look at from 2017, the additional rangers, the additional staff that have gone into national parks, it's contrary to what they are saying. I'm not going to be lectured by a union that seems to be part of the problem, which is to lock up the park. So I know the resources are going into national parks, and we've got to get on with hazard reduction. Let's make that the priority rather than other priorities in the park. And I'm happy to be criticised, but at the end of the day, my job as a leader is to protect community, and we know that the fuel on the forest floor in national parks is part of the problem.
John, there have been critics about at the moment, and they have pointed the finger at politicians, given the fact that there has been such great work at the moment, particularly from firefighters and communities getting together. They've been donating goods, they've been donating services, yet all politicians are doing at the moment is attacking each other, so it's kind of bringing out the worst in each other. We saw that with Barnaby Joyce yesterday and his comments that he has since apologised for. But is it right now, is my question, is it right to be playing the blame game?
No, it's not right, but unfortunately, we also have to defend ourselves. I was on a radio interview live on the Mid-North Coast, an ABC interview, and where the particular journo decided to play the climate change card, tried to play the RFS budget cuts card. I was getting on there to actually talk about the fires and the threat ahead of us. We've got to defend ourselves, and unfortunately that means we're going to be now talking about issues that we probably shouldn't be talking during these fires. But right now my message is we'll deal with all these issues. There are learnings out of every disaster, and these fires, it's a disaster. We'll learn from it. Right now we've got to be focused on getting these fires turned out before we get into a really tough summer period, and that has been our focus as a government.